Well, hey, welcome back to the channel here. Um, so today is just kind of a general lecture, hopefully not a rant. Um, this is more just about my thoughts and my observation on the colonies, and I admit this is a very general point of view, but I want to address some concerns I have, or rather, address some points, namely how the right and left in our country are trying to look at the colonies. And this is just general, and I'm not an expert, on the colonies of the United States. I'm not a historian or anything. And if I say anything that you're like, hey, I can absolutely prove him wrong, it was this or it wasn't that, please do. I'm not opposed to people correcting me. So understand that this is, while this video is intended to be somewhat educational, this is more about thoughts, and this is more about addressing certain points of view that people have now about the colonists. And I think this is really important to understand in our modern time, where these people were coming from versus what we are dealing with now as a nation. And I'm only talking about the United States. I think a lot of people in the world are dealing with a lot of the same issues we are, but I just like to keep it to what our country is dealing with right now, unless I do want to address, the greater world. So I found this random slideshow here. This is from a place, I just found this too. I did an image search of a colonial town, and it pulled up this site and a slideshow here. So this is from colonialamerica.thinkport.org. And the page is just called Colonial America Slideshow. So I want to start by reading this. It's very brief, it's not a long slideshow, and then I'll get into my point of view about things. So, during the 1500s, Europeans explored North and South America. Some nations, including the Spanish, began to establish settlements. So again, it wasn't just North America, it was the tropical Americas, or Central and South America too, okay? And not all of South America is tropical. Obviously, the further end of it reaches down near, Antarctica. So, all right. In the 1600s, many European countries began to establish settlements along the Atlantic coast of North America. British, French, Dutch, and Swedish colonists left their home countries and sailed across the Atlantic Ocean in search of riches, freedom, safety, and new lives. Okay. Here we have a nice little map, it shows Dutch, English, French, Spanish, Swedish. And we have, New Sweden, Jamestown, these other places, Rhode Island. So, okay, they were coming here from a lot of places in search of riches, freedom, safety, and new lives. Some settlements were created to trade with the Native Americans for goods such as fur. Other settlements were created as farming communities where colonists planted food crops such as corn and wheat, and cash crops like tobacco. Colonists came for many different reasons. Some colonists hoped to find gold quickly and return to their countries as wealthy people. Others sought new opportunities and a chance to make a living. Some looked for the freedom to practice their own religions. Take note of this last part here, please. Some looked for the freedom to practice their own religions. That's going to be a little bit more complex of an issue to address. I don't think it's terribly complex, but I'm going to get to that point, okay? All of the settlements faced challenges. Disease killed many colonists. Settlements often faced hostile Native Americans. Some colonists chose poor locations for their settlements in areas that were too cold or too damp or had little fresh water. Some settlements succeeded and some failed, with the colony either dying out or colonists deciding to return to their home countries. The settlements that succeeded grew, with more and more colonists joining them. The success of the settlements also encouraged colonists to form new settlements in the area. Gradually, Great Britain formed 13 colonies along the Atlantic coast. By the 1700s, these colonies decided to fight for their independence from Great Britain. The Revolutionary War led to the creation of the new United States of America. The map shows colony borders as of 1763. So you have the southern colonies, the middle colonies, New England colonies, okay? I'd like to point out that this is just all they really knew at this point. Now, during the Revolutionary War, I don't know how far west they had expanded territory, but as far as the colonies, they really only knew this region here, and it may have expanded past this red line a little bit to other places here. But ultimately, this is all they had. And they didn't know just how much resource this new world would have for them, but they were already happy here. Okay, so I'm going to get to that too. And what I'm addressing today is that first, just to get something clear, we have two things going on, okay? We have two things happening. We have right and left in this country. And from my observation, I don't know if I've said this in another video yet or not, but I'll say it again. In the United States, in United States politics, we have right and left. If we remove religion from both of those sides, if we shuck off Christianity from the right and we shuck off feminism from the left, then what do we have? You know, what's the idea here between right and left? Well, in this case, it means we've got different ideas about governance because we get rid of all the sentimental stuff. What do we have? We have things like the Federalist versus Anti-Federalist letters. And so at the core, it means that right wing is about less government and left is about more. I've heard several arguments from the right-wing Christians that this was never supposed to be an atheist country. They blame atheism for feminism. The left wing says this is the freedom to do and be whoever you want without addressing their own abuse or problems. Either side, really. So this country wasn't meant to be either one, Christian or atheist or feminist. What it says in the First Amendment is that the government shall not make any law respecting an establishment of religion. What that means is that the rule is placed on the government, not the people. It's placed on the government that they will not establish law respecting religion or making religion a part of their governance, no matter what religion. It doesn't say specifically that they ban any religion. It specifically says that they will not ban any religion. It simply means that the government isn't allowed to have religious bias in their decision making. It means that the people are free to practice religion or not. Okay? And while this isn't specifically meant to be Christian or atheist, what I will address to the left, because they're always saying, our Constitution allows you to be who you want and do what you want and blah, blah, blah. I get it. But there are certain limitations. For example, we shouldn't be trying to indoctrinate children into feminism in our schools. In fact, all of our schools, including universities, weren't supposed to be injecting political views to the classroom. And if there were going to be political views, they were to be taught as objectively as possible. That is not the case, especially when you get higher up in education. But now it's all the way down to what, grade school level, where this very strange agenda is being pushed on children. That's not okay. That's abuse. I don't care which way you try to swing it. And that's not okay. And I don't think our government is supposed to allow that to happen. Yeah, you say, Tom, that's the left might say, Tom, feminism isn't a religion. I would say that the left has basically taken all of the oppressive value of the old, the old guard of oppression, right, from the right wing, taken that, added a bunch of extra fuel for the fire and doused it in kerosene. And now these feminists have literally burned down some parts of their own cities in the name of their flag that can't seem to have enough colors. Do you see a pattern here? I do. I think throughout history, there's always a new religion that comes up, and they decide to condemn everybody else who isn't one of them. Even Christianity had that. Granted, there's a lot. I think there's more history going on with Christians where we don't see the oppression against Christianity, where they were condemned for being Christian. I don't know how long that was. I'm not a Christian historian. And I'm leading to another point here. I know I'm kind of ranting again, but my ultimate point here, this number one point, is to the left, is that while we are not a Christian nation, okay, because we're not, what we are is, in fact, a right-wing nation. Our Constitution is right-wing. At least if we divide things into right and left. If we shuck off Christianity from the right and feminism from the left, feminism is definitely a religion. It is tribal prejudice conviction. Okay, and that's what a religion is. If you look at it from an anthropological point of view, it is a bunch of people convicted to a bunch of sentimental and tribal ideas that are based on prejudice. What is prejudice? It means that here's a mountain of information, but no, we're going to believe all this other stuff anyway. We're going to believe that the earth is 6,000 years old. We're going to believe in the wage gap. Even though these things have been proven completely wrong, we're going to believe in it anyway. That's prejudice. This is something that Homo sapiens do all the time. Okay, so if we look at things objectively here, what we look at is the fact that no, this country isn't supposed to be Christian, and it's not supposed to be atheist. It just means the government is not supposed to have any religious bias in its policy making. It says so in the First Amendment. And so what we get is the fact that this is a right-wing nation. It means the Constitution is about having less government interference and control over our lives. That's what the Constitution is for, to create opportunity for the people and restriction on government, because our founding people in this country studied history and they understood that all the way back to the pharaohs, the most destructive force in any culture in history always winds up being its oppressive government. You can have the gangs, you can have this, you can have that, you can have all these things, but ultimately it comes down to the government being the most oppressive force in any culture. Eventually, a government becomes too corrupt for its people to be able to live their lives with a regular normalcy, to be able to live and let live. That they now have to start worrying every day about what their government is going to do to them and what kind of punishment, what kind of undue burden they're going to have to carry because their government decides it should be so. And that is what our Constitution is supposed to help as a foundation of our country. What constitutes the United States of America is to limit government power so that the people of this country do not have to deal with it, that we can live our lives in freedom. In the context of the Constitution, it means freedom from tyranny. That we can go about our lives living and doing business and being responsible for our own communities and protecting our communities ourselves without having to rely on the government or the police to do everything for us. This is our country, not the government's. That's what the Constitution says. And I'm not totally against police, but I am starting to think in this process now that maybe the people who make laws should not be the ones who dictate enforcement. Maybe there should be a separation between governance and who gets to and have control of enforcement. And maybe the police should be volunteer instead of operated by the state. That's something for another video for another day. I'm not totally against the police, but I have certain views on that. So, going back to this other section 2 of this big lecture, we established that right and left wing means less government versus more, and that this country is, in fact, a right-wing country. That doesn't mean it's Christian, and it doesn't mean that we can just indoctrinate everyone either into feminism or any of this other stuff just because we're free to believe things. We're free to believe things so as long as it does not jeopardize the well-being of this nation, that it doesn't infringe on people having opportunity in their lives. If you indoctrinate children this way, or you indoctrinate people into fear, you are trying to bottleneck their mind. You're trying to limit their information and resources so that you can control them. And that's not okay in our country. That's not what our Constitution is for. So let's move on to section 2 and get back to the colonists. So we're going to go back here. Some looked for the freedom to practice their own religions. It doesn't just mean Christianity or anything, but people from Europe were coming here so that they could practice whatever religion they wanted. Take a good look at any painting or any picture from the colonies, okay? Just any one of these where we see people. Obviously, this isn't, this is the Spaniards against these tropical American natives. But when we go and we look at these people, these colonists, take a good look. I don't see a lot of cross-bearing going on here. I'm not trying to attack Christianity. Actually, I'm trying to make a point about our Constitution. And I'm trying to emphasize Christianity because it's being over-glorified on one side and it is being absolutely demonized on another. And I realize that the Christian side, they do have to fight for themselves because they are being unfairly attacked. And again, I'm not against Christianity, but I am with the Constitution that no religion, including feminism, should be installed in our Constitution. If you want people to be free to do what they want, let them. Let them do what they want as long as they don't hurt anybody. That should be all we need. Whether our founding fathers were Christian or deist or atheist or whoever, whatever they were, agnostic, I don't care. They put all their sentiments aside and tried to create a document that would be good for everybody. That's the noble thing to do. But you don't see a lot of cross-bearing, so I want to address both the right and left here. Both seem to emphasize that the colonists were coming here to try to establish Christianity and to try to have a Christian culture. The right wing might say they were trying to have a decent Christian culture. The left might say they were trying to have an overbearing Christian culture. The right wing is going to say we're bringing Christianity here because it was the thing that they used to govern themselves and to keep stability, and it all came down to Christianity. I don't think so. I'm not denying that a lot of them were Christian, but I'm going to deny that it at the core, their stability came down to their faith in God. And then on the left, we have these people who say they were raping and pillaging natives and trying to spread their Christianity everywhere and their whiteism all over the colonies and trying to oppress people with Christianity. Neither one is the case, really. Again, you don't see a lot of cross-bearing on these people. Nowhere does it really say in this slideshow or any history book that I've read that the colonists were really trying to establish religion as a foundation of governance. Or that the colonists, and I'm talking about the North American ones, that they were trying to establish religion to run their lives. Actually, I would say that they were trying to get away from religion altogether. Not to be atheist, they had churches in their communities, but it was a community event. They were trying to get away from the crown and the church of Europe so that they could bring their religion back to something more sentimental, more community and family based, rather than something of an overbearing force upon their daily lives, which was the church of Europe. How much of that was overbearing and how much was benign, I don't know. But what I'm observing here is that the colonists were trying to get away from the church. They were also trying to get away from the crown. They were trying to get away from these things so that they could go to a place where they could be left alone and live decent lives, even though they knew there were risks. They didn't just come here and say, well, that's it, we're going back home. Some did. Some had to. Most of them moved to other places that were more profitable and safer, which says so in the slideshow we have here. By the way, traveling across the Atlantic was very difficult and very dangerous. That was an undertaking in its own right. So once people got here, it's like, okay, do we really want to go back into that ocean again? Because of nor'easters and storms, and what if something happens to the food supply on the ship? People could die. Ocean crossing was very, very dangerous. You could catch a cold, and then by the time you get to the colonies, maybe you're about to drop dead, and you do. So if people loved the church and the crown so much in Europe, then why were they willing to die just to get here? Okay. And again, I'm not saying they were trying to abolish or change religion, but they were trying to just make it a community and family-based thing. Now, you're going to say, no, Tom, that didn't happen. Well, it did. But they did this and that. They were raping and pillaging. No, they weren't. I've never read anything that the colonists were raping and pillaging anyone. I think where the left gets confused is with the Spaniards of the tropical Americas. Okay, it says this painting is of the Spaniards conquering, I guess here, the Aztec Empire. Okay. Um, the Spaniards, on the other hand, who sailed down to the tropical Americas, they did have an agenda to bring the church with them. They had an agenda to establish church everywhere they could. But I still don't think the Spaniards were all about raping and pillaging anyone. I think if you look at the history, they came here, yes, as soldiers of God or something, as a mission, but I think they too probably tried to get along with the natives on some level. And the natives of both North and South America had been warring on each other for a long time. They were not peaceful with each other. Oh, but the whites were so barbaric. No, not necessarily. Especially when we're talking about the colonists, they were trying to make good with the natives, and the natives betrayed them. Now, you could say, Tom, you're wrong. Okay, fine, prove me wrong. The natives didn't like each other. And when they saw colonists doing trade with tribes that they didn't like, one tribe sees the colonists doing trade with a tribe that they don't like, then maybe they attack the colonists. This is what the colonists had to put up with, along with everything else. Their crops not growing, or they just found a bad area to live in. Wintertime cold and illness and death, pneumonia, everything. The natives were also a threat to them. And I think increasingly over time, maybe the colonists lost more and more trust in the native people. And I don't know a whole lot about that, but it seems in my observation that as they, moved westward, people who were pushing west were more willing to fight and had a lot less patience to deal with natives in general. In other words, this history changed over time, sentiments changed, and I think even the people going on the Oregon Trail much later were trying to, I don't think they were totally just ready to go to war with natives, but they were much more prepared for the idea and the fact that they would probably have to fight them to survive. And that these tribes had been warring on each other for thousands of years. So my point is that when the Spanish came here, they did have this idea of establishing church, but that's not to be confused with the northern colonists, who really just seem to want to have it at a more community-based level. Because when you look at the Spaniards coming over here, they are in armor. They are bearing crosses. They do have the church in mind. But that's not to say they totally began raping and pillaging immediately. I think they probably tried to make dealings and trade with the people here because they too only had so many supplies that they could bring with them. And again, traversing the Atlantic Ocean is very dangerous. When you're talking about crossing the tropical Americas, when you're talking about going into tropical regions of this planet, there are hurricanes like every day in the Atlantic Ocean that these people had to sail through just to get here. The northern people, again, had to deal with nor'easters. So the Atlantic was very, very dangerous. They probably lost a lot of supplies on their way here. So they had no choice but to try to make some connection with natives in order to trade for resources. And eventually things wound up in warfare. And I think the Spaniards definitely were more in a mindset, and, they came in armor. And everything I'm saying here is very basic, but I'm trying to drive a core understanding for people of the difference between these two groups during that time and our perceptions right now of what they were about. Okay. So I think the left side tends to, we bring Christianity and feminist sentimental views back into the picture. I think the feminists like to say the colonists were like the Spaniards. They're getting confused. And even the Spaniards, I don't think were here just to conquer and pillage. I think they did want to do some trade with the natives, probably because they had to. And so did the colonists. And I think it comes down to a lot of details here. Of course, the left is going to say, no, Tom, all the history is white and it's just everything. Well, I think I don't think that's the truth. I think we have a lot of documentation and writings from these people that are preserved. A lot of history is about looking at documentation, even just documents from regular people during any given time, not just figureheads, but from regular people writing about the time they were in, from all sorts of journals and things that are recovered in history and preserved. I think feminists are the ones who are trying to distort history right now. I don't think it's necessarily Christianity. They might be on some level, but I think feminists are doing it at such a massive level, and they just project and try to blame everyone for what they're doing. And so we've got a lot of conflict and crazy bananas going all over the place, left and right. I think mostly from the left. But I just wanted to clear up some of those points about who these people were. They were regular people just trying to get away from Europe and just trying to live regular lives. And they were willing to cross the Atlantic and possibly die at sea, and then possibly die here too, just to experience a new life for themselves. Okay, and I'm going to make another video, I think, where I talk about my thoughts on where we are as a country at this point, but I think it has a lot to do with these people in terms of our state of mind. I think we've had enough of elites and, big organizations ruling so much over our lives and bottlenecking our resources that we feel, once again, that there is a new era coming to welcome us, but we have to bear a burden of some kind to get through this turmoil that we're in. I think, for example, if we found a way to eliminate a lot of the financial problems going on in our modern time right now, probably a lot of this tension and cultural divide would ease up, and a lot of it would probably disappear if we could take care of a lot of the financial issues going on. The problem is we don't have a new world to go to get away from it. And in the revolution, those people didn't go anywhere. They had to fight. They had to do what they could to procure their freedom from tyranny. Okay? And that might all be for another video. But I'm just saying we've gone through a lot of different mindsets. We started out very patriotic when we had to fight for this country and establish it. And then we went through some, regular life and building our culture. And then we went through Civil War. Then we went through more building. Then we went through World War I. Then we went through more building again. Then we went through World War II. Then we went through a very conservative time in the 50s. Then we had a very liberal time in the 60s. Then we had very business again, and we're all that. And then we went through a cool phase in the 90s, and then since 9/11, we've been waking up to the fact that there is growing tyranny in our nation that is undeniable now, that there have just been a lot of things going on that are obviously bad. There's a lot of corruption happening. And so now we're not just entering a new phase of bringing back conservative, because I don't think we're going to go back to a totally traditional time again for a lot of reasons. And I don't think we're going to have a feminist time either. I think feminism has burned itself out like kerosene. It lit up really fast. Now it's burning out. I think the new era of this nation is going to be different. And I just want to collect my thoughts and talk about that maybe in another video. But we are entering a time now of more patriotism, because that's what reality is calling for now. That not only we're conservative, but patriotic. And that's a whole new ballgame. That's a whole different scene. And we're not just entering it, we're here. So anyway, that's the differences. I hope it was good food for thought. And I might talk about it a little more in another video if I decide to read up on it a little bit and point out some more differences. But right now, the point of my videos here are just to bring out the basics and the basic ideas and the real differences, the reality versus our common modern sentiments that seem to dictate so much of how we perceive history or facts in general. I'd like to point out that a lot of this stuff, first, they were totally different. We're talking 200 some years ago, totally different ways of living, totally different. Even 100 years ago, people could not even predict what a TV was, what electricity was, let alone all the things it's produced. Even just 100 years ago, they wouldn't have been able to predict our technology, let alone our way of life or anything. But what's amazing is that the Constitution still stands. It stood the test of time, and it is one of the greatest documents mankind has ever written. So I'm going to end it there. If you've stuck around to listen to this tangent, then thank you very much. I do appreciate your time, and I do try to respect that in these videos, even though I talk a lot. And a lot of this are just points of view. I really do appreciate you sitting here and listening. And I hope you will do your own research and that this information will promote something in your mind to go look into these matters a little further and figure it out for yourself. That is really the intention of this. So thank you again for listening and your time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.